I use it for recording? It's like $1.19 or something. I've got a password if I use it. We'll get later.
Mr. Speaker, we heard actually very little from the first affirmative speaker about what homeschooling is and why people choose to do it. And what we believe firmly on the negative team is that homeschooling provides better educational outcomes for the vast majority of students who use it. But more than that, it provides essential religious and cultural identity for parents and communities who have a right to that identity and who homeschooling is critical for that. There are 2 points of rebuttal I want to look at before moving on to our case. The first of these is about their conception of where rights balance in society. And the second of these is about the specific harms to individual opportunity that they saw in homeschooling. So the first of these, on the rights balance and how it stood. They told us that, to quote Matt Sherman, we should concede practically everything in society for the sake of social cohesion. That's not true. If we did that, we'd be Singapore, right? And in the vast majority of Western liberal democracies, we actually preference individual autonomy as high or higher than social cohesion. That we accept a certain degree of uncertainty in society because we recognise that the most important thing is that individuals are free to pursue what is happy to them. We limit it in the rare cases, not as the norm. So conceptually, we disagree with their understanding of how our society works. But then they said it wasn't even particularly about social cohesion in a serious way. It was about ensuring that individuals could contribute to society. We just reject straight out that homeschooling denies the ability of people to contribute to society. And as I'll be telling you more, we think actually there are often better educational outcomes, but at least probably about the minimum standards that we enforce equally under both a homeschooling and a school environment. Then in terms of the opportunities to children, in the first part of Matt's speech, we got fairly generalist analysis about the government knows more and kids need skills, and that parents are not objective. We say, well, that's correct. Parents are subjective because they know their children better than the government that is objective. Objective because they don't know the needs of individual children. They don't know the different learning abilities of different children. They asserted that children need more skills, skills they couldn't get from homeschooling. Well, ladies and gentlemen, we think the skills you need to engage in society are minimum standards of literacy, numeracy, and understanding of how the societal system works. And all of those are covered for in minimum standards that are required in homeschooling also. They couldn't tell us what these extra skills were above and beyond that. But they also had 2 practical harms that they told us in terms of parental rights. They told us the intellectual harm to children who are educated with different emphases. And we actually think that in many cases that distorted emphasis is good, because in the vast majority of homeschooling cases where that happens, the kids want it. Not all kids want equal education in maths and sciences. You already know in the vast majority of cases, kids as young as 5, 6 and 7 already have a very strong idea about the sort of careers and futures they want to pursue. And we think homeschooling, and whether they like maths, whether they like English, whether they like science, homeschooling best allows the prodigies, the kids with different emphasis, to actually realise their full potential earlier on. When it comes to socialisation, we say, ladies and gentlemen, I'll give you much more in my analysis, that the glib assertion that you get better socialisation in schools doesn't hold. That particularly for many of the cases where children are homeschooled, they are cases where they would not have positive socialisation experiences at school. And finally, in terms of individual opportunities, we just want to point out that they had a narrow conception of what those were at all. Because more importantly, we say there is a right to children to have a religious and cultural identity and a history. And that rebuts this conception of individual rights too. So, what do I bring to us in this debate? Firstly, I just want to be clear on what we think our model for homeschooling is. We think it's largely based on what it is, that there are minimum standards of curricula that homeschool education has to deliver, that are the same curricula that school education has to deliver. And those are the small set of that, we're even happy to concede that we might get a social worker to visit the houses of homeschooled people once a year, just to check that everything is going well in those communities. But we think we set the same minimum standards there. And just as schools even themselves have the ability to choose how to teach those core requirements, something they supported, so should schools. So, 3 points. Why is this essential for respecting the rights of parental autonomy, and particularly the religious identity of parents? Secondly, why is this better for kids educationally? And thirdly, why is this better for kids socially? Well, let's start with parental autonomy. Why do we give parents power in society? We think that's because, unlike what the affirmative team thinks, we think there's actually practically zero consensus on the best way to raise a child. Every child is different. Every child coming from different communities with different backgrounds has different cultural norms established at a very young age. And all of those place different expectations and different emphases, and there will be different responses to inputs from outside. And that's why we think parents are in the best place to shape the life of their child. And we only intervene and interrupt this in extreme cases. They asserted this happens willy-nilly. Well, no, it only happens in the case of gross abuse. In fact, just to show you how important society thinks the right of parents to choose is, even in cases of clear abuse, we only remove it when it is significant abuse and there's no potential for parents to reform that and prevent it from happening again. Parental rights are important, not just because the parents have a right, but also for the children. We also think it's important when it comes to the right to raise their child in a religious life. We think it's something that's recognised in the right to pursue a religious education in schools, and the right to have a cultural identity. And we think that state schools in many cases can't provide for this, that when you need to be able to pray 5 times a day at school, that when you believe that your cultural and religious values mean you should be protected from exposure to sex and sexuality and many other corrupting influences in society, we say state schools are bad at doing that, not just because they often pursue a moral agenda in order that is counter to that religious value, but also because they can't control what the kids tell each other otherwise. And so for some of the big religions, I'm sure our affirmative supports religious education, but for many religious minorities, like the Sikhs, like smaller sects of Christianity and Judaism, religious schools don't exist. And if they can't homeschool, they can't raise their children to live a good religious life. And that destroys their cultural and religious identity. Secondly, why is this best for kids educationally? We think, what sort of parents do this? Sure, it's often religious people. And we think it's also often those who think the state system is failing to deliver good educational outcomes for their children. Even in purely religious cases, we think they want what's best for their children and educating them well is part of that. And they've shown their commitment to doing that by taking on the burden of homeschooling. And the vast majority want better outcomes educationally. We think they can provide it. Well, why is that? Because we think homeschooling provides personalised education. And for the case of prodigies, budding authors, people with learning disabilities, in many cases, homeschooling is able to provide that one-on-one attention that is customised to their learning needs, that only a farcically imaginary super-funded state system could ever hope to provide. But more than that, we think that that one-on-one attention is critically important. And it's something that every educational survey has shown that that is the most important thing. We actually think fact-supported. In the United States, surveys of 8th and 9th grade year level students in homeschooling act at the level of 12th graders in the state system. Finally, we think it's best for kids socially. Why is this? We think many of us in this room would agree that school was one of the most emotionally traumatizing experiences that many of them went through. And for many children with learning disabilities, for many children who come from minority religious backgrounds, school is a place where they are persecuted. And as a result of the bullying that comes from that, they learn to disagree with and to hate further those others. At adult level, they can do better, and the statistics back this. At the end of this debate, we're very proud to have